What's up, everybody? I'm Cody, this is the Mutant Agenda, and today we're going to talk about some X-Men comics, because that's what we do. Today I wanted to start with X-Men Red, issue number 10, which remains the most socially relevant X-book on the stands. Now, I mentioned on Instagram, I want to mention here too, that I've seen a lot of people say that it's working against the book, that the message might be kind of on the nose, that he's coming a little too heavy-handed. Normally I do like things to be a little bit deeper than surface level, just kind of handed to you, but I think he's really making it work in X-Men Red. Our characters are demonstrating that they are indeed heroes, they're behaving like heroes, they're talking like heroes, and honestly, in today's social climate that we're living in, with everything going on in the government, on the news, the media constantly berating us with all of this misinformation, this is the kind of book that works. This is the kind of book that is going to speak to a very broad audience. And I think that's important right now where we are. And who better to take care of this job than the X-Men? X-Men Red, issue number 10, was written by Tom Taylor, with art by Roge Antonio, colors by Rain Barreto, and lettering by Virtual Calligraphy's Corey Petit. Now, the reason I think that X-Men Red is working, despite being very on the nose with its messages, is because I think Tom Taylor has such an impeccable feel for who these characters are. He's a master at characterization. He never sacrifices any development between these characters as people, and he never sacrifices any of the action, the intensity, the intrigue, the suspense. He never lets go of any of that. I think it's because he's taking what a lot of people look for in comics, especially in X-Men comics. He's taking that and he's modernizing it. He's very much modernizing their problems that they face into our modern day era, and for that reason I think this book is very special, and I think it's going to be very memorable after it ends, and I think it's one that a lot of people are going to revisit. A great example of what I'm talking about is when Cassandra Nova has taken Jean's likeness and she's convinced the general public that Jean has pretty much gone off her rocker, and she's spewing some pretty early Magneto radical hate speech about humans versus mutants. And the general public has latched onto this because it supports their narrative. They don't care about any truth that might disprove what's going on because it fits. It fits with what they've heard their whole life, which is that mutants are inevitably trying to replace, human beings, and that it's only a matter of time. They're like ticking time bombs, basically. It fits the narrative, it's what they want, and we see so much of that with the media in our modern day real lives. Okay, so with that, I do want to get into some spoilers with this issue, so you know the drill. I feel like this issue answers two very classic nerdy questions. Number one, if Magneto's helmet can block out psionic attacks, why doesn't everybody have one? And number two, why aren't the Avengers ever helping these guys out with their problems? The Avengers not helping out the X-Men makes sense most of the time, because the X-Men are outcasts from the rest of the Marvel Universe, just by their very nature. And let's be honest, the X-Men are like one big queer party, and every time the Avengers show up, it just feels like your neighbor called the police. A friend of mine on Instagram, Planet X-Men, pointed out how silly it kind of felt that the Avengers were even called for help, because Emma and Jean were able to take on Cassandra Nova and Grant Morrison's new X-Men. And Jean didn't even use her lifelines to phone a friend. She could have called Psylocke. And I have to say, those are some really good points. There's a lot of ways you could take on Cassandra Nova, and this one felt a little bit lame, because like I said, the police were just called on my super queer party. As for Tony Stark helping to fund the manufacturing of, hundreds, thousands of Magneto helmets for Jean's team, the Avengers, Namor's army, it just feels like a huge liability. Where are all these helmets going to go at the end of this? Because in the wrong hands, you could build an army immune to psionic attacks, which, if used against the X-Men, can prove pretty troublesome. I'm just a little bit worried where these are going to end up. Do they belong in a museum? Do they belong locked up on like a sword interstellar ship? It just feels weird. And also, Magneto should have trademarked that shit because he could be cashing in on royalties. I'm really curious to see what Magneto would have to say about this. Where are you? Daddy, where are you? So overall, I enjoyed this issue. Tom Taylor's voice is still strong. His messages are still clear. It looks great visually. And it was fun. It requires a lot of suspension of disbelief. Honestly, somebody who doesn't read a lot of comics could pick this up and be like, oh my god, they all have Magneto helmets and the Avengers are here. This is crazy. Wow. But if you're an Omega nerd that's been doing this a while, it feels kinda hokey, but overall, I enjoyed it. It's not that I disliked it. So I would recommend picking this up. even though I just spoiled it. So I feel that Typhoid Fever X-Men is worth a mention because Jean's here and part of her team is in it. I don't know too much about Ms. Typhoid, but she kind of just, at least in this story, feels like a poor man's Legion, and I'm not really feeling it. This issue was fun. It felt like a fun, like, X-Men feature, like when an artist you like is featured on a track. Like, that's kind of how it felt. But overall, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I love that she's kind of going into everybody's heads and, like, digging out their fears or putting them in certain scenarios. She's in Iceman's, and she's, like, flirting with him, and Bobby's like, no, you don't understand. I'm really not interested. And so when he doesn't reciprocate, she just fucking starts melting him, which I thought was actually hilarious. So, yeah, I mean, cool? I don't know. I don't know much about Typhoid Mary. Sorry. Now we're going to talk about Iceman. Iceman, issue number 3, was written by Sina Grace, with art by Nathan Stockman, coloring by Federico Blee, and lettering by Virtual Calligraphy's Joe Sabino. Oh boy, I hope the gays don't disown me for this one. I didn't like this issue very much. I'm going to tell you why. First, I want to preface by saying I'm not sure if this book is for me, just audience-wise. I feel like with Sina Grace, what he was doing with his first series was, you know, Bobby coming out and Bobby coming to terms with his sexuality, which as a queer person, I can relate to. There was more for me to grab onto. This series is a lot of him exploring his sexuality, and it's very focused on his love life and hunting for affection, and those are things that I just can't relate to. I feel like I've outgrown that, and it's just, I feel like this might work for maybe a younger audience, a younger queer audience in particular. They might appreciate this book more than I would, and they might cherish it more than I do, but for me, it's just a little bit dull, and what we're seeing here is Bobby doing these pop culture references again, which I mentioned in an earlier Iceman review, are not my favorite. I find them grating. I don't think they age well. We're getting that a lot in this issue, and his humor just seems very stereotypical, pop culture based. It's all very dry to me, and I'm sure it has an audience. I'm sure there's people that like that. I don't. Another thing this issue does that I find grating is relying on nostalgia. It's kind of resting on this gimmick of the Amazing Friends, and when they get here, it doesn't feel all that amazing. It had a lot of potential that wasn't quite met. I'm also not the biggest Spider-Man fan, which might be misleading because there's a picture of Spider-Man behind me, but that wasn't even a gimmick that really excites me. I did like the Amazing Friends show when I was younger because I thought it was really cool that Spider-Man had friends who were like, you know, fire and ice elements. I was a sucker for elements and color coding. My god, I loved color coding, but I digress. I just didn't think that the payoff was as maybe interesting as it could be, and it was, once again, guess what unites them all on this day? They're all on dates. It's concerning itself with Bobby's love life, and it's just getting a little bit tiring to me. The art is not doing it any favors. I felt the art was pretty shaky in this issue, and yeah, it just doesn't have too many redeeming qualities. We do have 2 more issues to bring home all of the sinister stuff that Sina Grace has been planting throughout these early issues, so I'm gonna see it through. I'd like to see how it all resolves, but yeah, not my favorite book of the week, I'm sorry to say. Now it's time to talk about Baby Daddy, issue 2. I mean, Shatterstar, issue 2. Shatterstar, issue 2 was written by Tim Seeley, with art by Carlos Villa and Gerardo Sandoval, colored by Carlos Lopez, inked by Juan Blasco, and lettered by Virtual Calligraphy's Corey Petit. This was a pretty good issue, very action-packed. We learned a couple things about Shatterstar and Richter. We got some development with them. I really enjoyed the part where Shatterstar, or I think it might be Grandmaster narrating. He's narrating it like it's some kind of film, but he's talking about how Richter was the man that taught Shatterstar about life, taught him how to live, love, laugh, cook, all these little things. My heart just about broke reading it. It was the sweetest thing. Gringrave as a character, I am not excited about, and not just for the obvious reasons, not because I feel like she's stealing Shatterstar away from Richter, but I'm just not big on her because she feels very, very typical. She feels like the hard-edged person from the past that told Shatterstar literally, never love somebody, never love them, like, don't let them have that power over you, and it's just kind of a tired trope, and she just looks like a really pissed off Sailor Moon cosplayer who's just here to kind of like ruin Shatterstar's life, which she kind of is, but obviously I'm going to keep reading. And do I like this issue? I liked it. Shatterstar and Richter finally having kind of a talk about things was nice to see. From what I understand, I think Tim Seeley said in an interview that he approached this book as being kind of separate from the larger X-Men universe. He kind of just wanted to boil Shatterstar down to what he interpreted him as, which is kind of that, you know, hard-edged, dimension-hopping, gladiator kind of fight book, which is kind of what we're getting, and that's cool. I will say that it's nice to see any kind of representation. I am so excited that we saw, you know, two men kissing. We saw homosexual intimacy in Iceman and in Shatterstar this week. And I think that's huge. I think that's awesome. And I think that's great that it's being shown, that we're trying to maybe normalize this, finally, in comics. So that's a plus. That's a plus about Iceman. That's something I liked. Anyway, you guys, that's about all I have for today. I'm going to be back reviewing more comics. I know there was some X stuff I left out of this one. I will save it for later. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel to watch subsequent videos. And be sure to go visit my friends at Fantastic Comics. Go subscribe to them too. There's an awesome channel where Yule, my buddy, he'll break down the comics and how they rank in his store. It's really interesting to watch, it's really fun, and he gives you an insight into what's hot and poppin' in the new week of comics. I gotta go because I'm getting weirder, but thank you so much for watching. I'll see you later. Peace.
Big